All right. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here for First Service Residential's Mastering Board Essentials, Building a Better Board for a Stronger Community. My name is May Mockdad. I am Senior Director of Operations at First Service Residential, and I will be your moderator today. Serving on a board, whether for a condominium or a community association, is a big responsibility. When new board members join, it's crucial to align expectations, clarify responsibilities, and create a collaborative, effective team. Without the right foundation, seasoned members can feel overwhelmed and new members may struggle to find their footing, which leads to burnout and inefficiency. An association is only as effective as its leaders who run it, and that's why we are here today. Mastering Board Essentials is designed to help board members like you, both new and experienced, work together more effectively. Our panel of experts are here to share best practices and offer advice on how to get new board members started on the right foot while keeping seasoned ones engaged. So, today and during our discussion, we're going to be covering the key responsibilities of board members, how to build alignment between new and seasoned board members, strategies to prevent burnout and encourage engagement, as well as best practices for financial oversight, governance, and effective meetings. Before we begin, a few things to keep in mind during our conversation. There's no need to take note. We'll be recording this session and sending it to all attendees. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll address as many as possible. So let's dive right on in. We have a great program for you today. I want to introduce to you our panelists. Joining me today are Sharif Masri, Vice President, and Kathleen Walensky, Regional Director, both of First Service Residential. Kathleen, do you want to start us off? Do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, May. As May mentioned, I'm Kathleen Walensky with First Service Residential. I'm a regional director in our South Florida high-rise division, and I have been with our company almost 5 years. However, I have been in the association management industry for 30 years. 20 of those 30 years was when I lived in the mountains in Vail, Colorado. I've also worked in the association management industry internationally in St. Lucia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, and the Bahamas, and in Florida, up in Orlando, over in Naples, and from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. And I just want to say one thing. I have been a board member in the past of condominium associations where I was a homeowner, so I get it. I understand, what board members go through. So I just want to let you know that we at First Service Residential, we really and sincerely appreciate all that you do. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it's thankless. So thank you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Sharif?
Thank you. Sharif Masri. I am the Vice President for the Greater Tampa market. Over 30 years experience within hospitality and residential. Really excited about this webinar that we're doing because there is a lot of moving pieces when it comes to boards and impactful boards. And the more knowledgeable you are, more diverse you are, the better you are serving your community. So I look forward to today's presentation, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both. A little bit about me. I joined the First Service Residential team over 9 years ago as a regional director. And last year, I moved into a new and exciting role as a senior director of operations for South Florida Condo HOA division. I have been in property management for well over half my life, and we won't share that number, but I'm also an active board member at my community too. So I know it's a thankless job, it's a heavy weight, but it is very rewarding to your community and you're very, very appreciated. And I am also excited about this webinar too. So let's jump in. Why don't we start it off with Sharif? Sharif, for those who are new to the role as board members, what are the first steps that they should take?
That's a great point. I think first and foremost, we need to know our audience are in different states. So get to know your state statutes. For Florida, the statute is 718 for condos and 720 for HOAs. So understanding the rules, regulations that govern within the state will broaden your knowledge about what's rightfully right path to go or what you're trying to avoid, and also helps you keep your fellow board members as well as the residents dialed into what is transpiring or why it's transpiring. Those within the state of Florida, you need to complete certification within 90 days, and these certifications are provided by different vendors, but usually it's your association attorneys that can provide the 90-day certification. So that's one of the two key things that you need to keep focused on as you're going into that position. And then also understanding your condo, your association, what projects are happening, where they're at financially, and all the miscellaneous stuff. So you know what you are stepping into and not being surprised or being overwhelmed on what's about to transpire during your journey as a board member.
Thank you, Sharif. Kathleen, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to mention, I know we have board members from 4 different states joining us, but for the Florida board members, regarding Florida statute, First Service Residential actually has a lobbyist in Tallahassee. His name is Travis Moore, and he attends all the legislative sessions. And after he attends the sessions, he provides regular video updates, which are really informative and really great. And what we do is then send those video updates to our board members so that board members that we manage their associations are informed of critical issues that are affecting associations. I think one other first step recommendation for new board members would be to get together with your management team, your management partner, as soon as possible, as soon as you join the board, to get up to speed on all things association business related. I would highly recommend reading past meeting minutes, go back 6 months or a year just to see what decisions have been made, so you are up to speed on that. Reviewing current projects, what's going on currently, and reviewing reserve studies to understand what our upcoming capital projects on the horizon is really important. Going over the budget, sitting down with the manager, going over the budget, the current financials. And another really important aspect is to read past audits from your CPA and pay really close attention to the notes in your audits, because if an association has been carrying a deficit over the past, couple years or the past year, typically in the notes, the CPA will, identify, what, or make recommendations what the board or what the association should do for that deficit. I think, just by doing this kind of onboarding, it really does help new board members feel more confident in making decisions rather quickly, so they feel more up to speed, and it really does help them to contribute effectively. And it really does ensure that, it really aligns the new board members with the current board members. And that really does help, to move and make decisions going forward. And it really just sets the tone for a collaborative term for the new board member.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I also want to remind everyone that an association is a business, right? So just because there's new board members doesn't mean the business doesn't need to continue on. So the more that the board gets involved quickly and gets up to speed on the thought process of what, if it's not a total board change, if it's just a couple of board members, if they get up to speed on what the current board, or the previous board, I apologize, had in mind, and what they budgeted for, and what the plans were, it's going to be a lot less lag time in continuing the projects, continuing the management of the association, because the budget is based off of what they are expecting the projects to be. So there's not really if you come on with an agenda, hey, I want to change the playground. Well, do we have the funds for it right now, or do we need to wait and budget for it next year? Was this something that the current board budgeted for to have done? So great insight from everyone. Thank you so much. So let's go on to the next question. Sharif, I'll hand this one over to you if that's okay. Let's continue going over the basics. Board members need, what do you think the most important things that board members need to know to serve their community the most effective way?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, and we've all touched on it on the last question, was know your residents, know your property, understand where the areas of opportunity are. But as you step into that board seat, you really need to understand the bylaws. You need to understand the rules, regulations that also apply to your community, understand the financials, what is driving the financials, if there are variances, what's driving the variances. And I think it was alluded to earlier, is have that dialogue with the property manager or board members that are stepping off the board to understand not only the dynamics, but what has transpired in the past that helps understand why it's coming to fruition now. So the more knowledgeable and diverse you are regarding your property, the more you'll be able to make the right decisions and collaborate not only with your other board members, but also get a pulse check with all the residents to keep communicating to them on why things are, which direction you're heading, why are you heading in that direction. But again, keep in mind governing docs, those are really your safeguards to keep you within the parameter. So again, that's bylaws, knowing your rules, regulations, as well as your financials are the key three documents I recommend that like the back of your hand. Also defining board roles and responsibilities. So as the board's coming together, whether there is tenured board members or new board members or everybody's transitioning, is really to understand everybody's background on the role and what do they contribute towards the board and the association from their previous life or their current careers. If they have certain expertise or certain interests, then to ensure that they are seated in the right seat within the board. So, those positions consist of the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. So it's good to have a little collaboration and understand everybody's backgrounds. And it's a lot easier when you have the collaboration and transparency of everybody's background and what their interest is, to have a common interest of what you're going to enhance in the community or what initiatives and goals you're trying to achieve.
Also, I think another way board members can serve their communities effectively is keep in mind that committees can play a really important role in helping to support the board. Committees can give owners an opportunity to be involved. There are basically two different types of committees. There is what we call a standard committee, and this is a committee that would meet more on a regular basis, like a financial committee that might meet monthly once the financials are issued. And then the other type of committee is what is often referred to as a special committee or an ad hoc committee. And that's really for, the purpose of really just doing a one-time project, which that project might be just simply, revising the rules and regulations. So I think, keeping in mind that committees really can help serve their communities more effectively. And also, kind of talking and elaborating more on committees, I think committees, and I mention this a lot to board of directors, that committees are a really good way for an association to have a bench, so to speak. And what I mean by this is it really gets owners involved. They may be more inclined when it comes election time to run for the board. And that's really helpful because they already know, the inner workings of the board. They know the role of the board. They know the role of committees. They're already engaged and involved. So, it's always great to have kind of a bench of owners who, may be willing to step up to the plate.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. And then speaking of, board members and taking them from committees, well, what if you have new owners that are just jumping in on the board? It's even more important for them to make sure that they are involved as involved as possible with management, with reviewing the minutes, with really meeting with the vendors and understanding what their specific roles are, understanding how that association is run. Just imagine the association is a business. So an employee gets hired on, look at that perspective. They don't just come in and get thrown out there and, hit the ground running, doing things. They really need to step back for a minute, make sure they understand it. They understand the dynamics, the goals, the history. The history of the association is so important. If you're coming up for painting and need to do concrete restoration and all those other aspects, maybe we hold off on doing some other projects that we had in mind. But you wouldn't know that really until a new board member and a new owner comes in and understands a little bit of the history of that community. So yes, great input. Anything else you want to add on that, Sharif?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay, perfect. So Kathleen, I'll throw this one your way. Running board meetings effectively is absolutely, most definitely, hands down, the key to success. What are some of the best practices in your history?
Well, first and foremost, and I always recommend this to board of directors, is to use the Roberts Rule of Order. It's a manual for meeting procedures. It provides a meeting framework, and it really helps boards to run effective meetings and orderly meetings. So definitely use Roberts Rules of Order. I think next would be stick to the agenda. So important to try to just stick to the agenda. Following meeting protocols is another one. Keeping the meeting in order is really important. Try to guide the discussion back to the agenda if the discussion veers off the agenda. I think that's really important. And for the board to be to show the membership that they're trying to be respectful and cognizant of everyone's time, not just the board's time, but the owner's time. I think that's really helpful as well. I think, also board meetings nowadays, they're being held in person and they're being held online at the same time, which is great because there are, it's more engagement, for owners that either don't live on the property year round, or maybe they're traveling and they still want to participate and still want to hear what's going on in their community. So ensuring that it's a great experience for both, the members that are attending in person and online, making sure the AV is tested ahead of time, making sure the meeting room, is adequate, making sure that all the presentations are prepped and ready to go. I think that's really important. And then lastly, I just think, keeping accurate and efficient meeting minutes, because meeting minutes are the official records of the association. So I think that's really important.
Agreed.
Those are great points, Kathleen. I'd like to also add, I think, the ongoing communication to all the residents, so they already have a heads up and understand what is going to transpire during the board meeting. But again, to what Kathleen illustrated, was having an orderly meeting to conduct the board business without interruptions is essential. But after the meeting is open, and you can start the meeting by saying, after, please give us the respect to conduct the board meeting. But after the board meeting's open, we're going to open up to, Q&A session, or board members will be around after the board meeting. If you'd like to sidebar about, you have any questions or concerns, then we can address them at that time as well.
Those are some really great points. At one of my communities, we did implement Robert's Rules of Order. We also printed out what we were going to follow. And for the first few meetings, we actually had that available for the residents so that they knew what to expect during those meetings, because when we first took over management, it was just kind of a bit chaotic. So that was our way of creating structure and just putting it in front of them so they're reminded. Also, the board doesn't, they can agree to disagree. They can come to the meeting with that, but I believe that it's very, very important to be familiar. The board needs to be familiar with the items that are on the agenda, get comfortable with them, ask management questions beforehand, ask each other questions beforehand if need be, and they can come to the meeting agreeing to disagree on the vote. But I don't think utilizing the board meeting as a time to do the full board discussion, that's not an opportunity to get familiar with what they're voting on. We should be doing the homework beforehand, working with management, having the proposals in front of you, the bid comparisons, whatever it may be, the pros and cons, and coming to the meeting ready to answer questions, give an overview of what that item is, and be ready to vote. So I think that helps a lot, and it helps streamline, and it makes the residents see that you guys are working together, behind the scenes, working together. You're not voting, you're not conducting business behind the scenes, but you're putting in the homework to come prepared. Great. That is actually one of my favorite questions. So many boards, that leads us into actually this one. It's many board members struggle with engagement. Kathleen, how can board members encourage participation from the residents?
Well, kind of what I alluded to a little bit earlier is, utilizing committees to distribute responsibilities. I think that's a good way to encourage more participation, and to encourage volunteers and the owners to get involved. Some associations, you may not have social events, but maybe, start implementing some smaller social events to really encourage owners to get involved. I think that's really helpful. Regular updates to residents, whether it's a regular newsletter or maybe even holding town halls. I think that's extremely important to be able to encourage more participation. Another great one is sending out surveys to get input from residents, to get their buy-in, on some of these bigger decisions that the board is considering. I have a lot of associations right now that are doing some huge projects, and a lot of projects. And, the board could choose the color for this, or choose the new railings, here. But what they're doing is sending out a survey with the, what they're considering, to kind of just get a pulse of the community to see what the owners want. And that really does encourage more participation. And then I think lastly would be to hold effective and respectful board meetings, like we were talking about a moment ago. I have so many homeowners over the past few years who say they would love to go to the board meetings, but one, they either are 2 or 2.5 hours and they simply don't have the time, or they start too late at night, or there's a lot of drama and there's a lot of disrespect in these meetings, and I don't have time for that. So I think if a board can really hold effective and respectful board meetings, they will see more participation from members.
Yeah. Sharif, do you want to add anything before I chime in?
Go ahead, May.
So one of my favorite things is mass emails to the residents. I encouraged, when I was in RD, I encouraged my properties to send out at least one mass communication a week. If we didn't have anything to say, we'd remind about a rule or regulation that we are seeing that residents aren't paying attention to. But if we have a board meeting, we send a mass communication summarizing what's going, what happened in the board meeting, the key takeaways, completely different from the minutes. If we need engagement, like Kathleen was saying, we are painting the railings or painting the building. Do you guys have any color suggestions? We actually end up getting responses from maybe engineers or architects that are residents, or interior designers, or just people that are interested in that. And we end up forming committees just based on that, just because the residents see, oh, wow, they're doing something that I actually enjoy and I want to be a part of for my community. After all, this is my investment. So all of these are really, really great. Kathleen?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just recently, I had a board, one of my associations, and the board was all, together on a decision. They all knew, what they wanted to see for this particular project. And it was suggested that they send out a survey just to get a feel from the membership. So they did. And it was overwhelming that the membership wanted something totally different from what the board, as a group, there were 5 of them, had decided. And it really made the board step back and go, oh, maybe we should take this into consideration, because, as board members, all of you have probably been there, you make a decision and it's really, there's a lot of drama. So the power of the surveys, it's really, it's really powerful. And, a lot of our associations do use the survey platform that we offer.
Yeah, no, it's like the blinders are taken off with those, with the surveys, because, it's typical of any community. You have hundreds of residents, yet maybe only 10% or 5% are voicing their opinion or speaking out. And those are the only people that you're hearing. So you're taking they're, just like in your example, hey, I thought the residents wanted this, but it was only that 5 or 10% that you're hearing from that are saying this. And a lot of times residents don't have time or aren't able to attend the board meeting. So sending these things out to get their input is priceless. Absolutely priceless. Okay, so Sharif, financial oversight is one of the board's most important responsibilities. What should the board really be focused on here?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, every board member needs to keep in mind that your fiduciary responsibility is essential, and it should be your primary task on serving as a board member is always considering the financial impact. When you start thinking of financials, it's also important to understand how did they derive, how did they surface, how are they created from the previous boards, or collaborating with residents to understand what triggered certain things to happen within the operating budget. And you want to stick with the operating budget. So unless there is a unforeseen circumstance that surfaces that is causing you to incur additional expenses that you can speak to, and it needs to happen, you need to stick to the operating budget and collaborate with the board as well as the property management team to ensure everybody's aligned. But the biggest part, I would say, in order to be able to speak to it and understand it, is to understand the historical financials prior to you serving on the board, how they came to fruition, what are the triggers that cause them to where they're at, and is the budget actually right sized? Is it meeting accommodations, or is it under budgeted where you're having certain line items that are going over? Like for Florida, insurance seems to be one of the trigger points that no matter what you budget, a lot of times your bills or your policies are coming in higher than what is estimated. So being able to understand it, being able to speak to it, being able to adjust to it, and then also forward thinking for the next year's budget, keeping those trigger points on top of mind so you're able to capture it as you're going through the budget process, so there isn't a mishap on the budget, and then you're reoccurring another year of shortcomings on the budget. So understanding also your reserves, so understanding what's within your reserves, which items are identified. I think a big piece of that is a lot of people think I have to follow the reserve. Well, the reserve is a guide. You can accelerate, you can defer items based on their life expectancy. So a lot of times you can just look at it from a visual perspective, and the board and the management company also makes recommendations, or you can get expertise in also to weigh in and validate your decisions, whether you want to accelerate or defer certain projects. Because once you start tapping into those funds, then it starts affecting all the financials, and you got to be able to speak to it and account for that as well. And then there's the pooled versus straight line funding. You need to understand which direction your association has been going historically and what you are doing now. But the biggest part, I think, is collaborating with the board members, being transparent, understanding historical to why it came to fruition, where you currently are, and then which direction you want to go, what your goals are, and then ensuring that moving forward for the next budget season that everything's captured to have an accurate budget and not have budget mishaps. It caused a lot of concerns within the community, right? It raises a lot of questions within the residents. So ensuring that you cross your T's and dot your I's regarding those items will ensure your success.
And another thing too, May, on budgets, especially for new board members, when they're reviewing the budget, kind of probably for the first time, hopefully the previous board and management has put together budget assumptions, or sometimes called a budget narrative, that kind of goes hand in hand with the budget numbers. The budget assumptions are really kind of a documentation, if you will, of how a board came up with a budget number compared to what the budget number was the previous year. So it's really helpful for a new board member to sit down with the budget, look at the numbers, and when they see a big variance for the current budget over the previous budget, to go right to the assumptions and and to identify, okay, how did the board come up with this number? You know, why was there such an increase or a decrease? So I think budget assumptions are really, really important. And a lot of times associations, when they are presenting the budget or having like budget, town halls, really,
Workshops, yeah.
sometimes, associations and boards will sit down with the membership before they approve the budget, is they go over these assumptions with the membership. And it really, you talk about transparency, and that is a really great way to be transparent with the members.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, Kathleen, if I could chime in, just one of the most successful associations within my world also execute budget workshops before actually diving into the budgets, because that's where you get to filter and discuss everything and come to an agreement on the direction before you actually go into the budget process. So there is no miscommunication or, let's pump the brakes and revisit this when you're under a deadline to get the budget approved so you can make your maintenance fee billing in time. So
yeah, budget workshops, definitely budget workshops, highly recommend them.
Absolutely. So what I'm getting out of this is understand the history, and really sit down and understand where we're at right now. And just like with any other business, understand where we need to go, where we're going and how much we need to put aside. I know in Florida, we have different statutes that require different inspections to be done on buildings and different work to be done. And those are big expenses that we do need to budget for in advance. But also, we're not for profit. So every single line item on that budget needs to be explained and accounted for. So there's really no playroom. So if we've planned for this to happen, we passed a budget, is this something we can hold off on in order to do something else? So I think proper planning and really doing the workshops and doing the town halls, it sets you up for success. And unless it's really unforeseen, it helps you avoid an increased possibility of a special assessment. So
Definitely agree.
I completely agree.
Yes.
So we've talked about a lot, and the board has a lot on their shoulders. So sometimes we may run into burnout. So or burnout is something many board members don't see coming until they're already overwhelmed. What are the warning signs, and how can board members avoid feeling stretched too thin? Kathleen, do you want to start us off with that one?
I'm kind of laughing at this question because it's really relevant right now for me, because I have had 3 board members from 3 different associations in the past few weeks reach out to me about this exact same thing. And first of all, I'm really grateful that they feel comfortable enough and look at me as like a trusted advisor for them to be able to talk to me about it. But I think, as a board, to really kind of look at other board members to see what those warning signs are of burnout. One would be frustration and irritability. Are there some board members that are snapping at other board members, or are they snapping at residents? Are they being impatient? I think that's, definitely a warning sign of burnout. Decreased participation and decreased engagement. Are they missing meetings? Are they just not replying to emails? That's another sign. Procrastination is another sign. And I think cynicism, which you might see this a lot from board members, where they, the attitude might be like, why bother? Or, does it really matter? Seeing that cynicism as far as warning signs. I think, as far as how to avoid, to feel being stretched too thin, I always mention to board members who reach out to me I recommend that they set boundaries. And what I mean is just to have them allocate a specific time where they will check and respond to association emails. And they make it very clear to management, and they make it very clear to their fellow board members that they have certain boundaries, because not every owner or board member is the same. Some board members are retired, some have a full-time job, some have, a family and a full-time job, some travel a lot. So, every board member is different. So setting boundaries, I think, is a really great way on how to avoid feeling stretched too thin. Delegating, don't try to carry the load all yourself, share it, with other board members. I think what's really important here when it comes to delegating is to remember that the board sets policies and they make decisions, right? But a management company, they implement those board decisions and they take care of the daily operations. So where I see a lot of burnout and being stretched too thin are the board members that really kind of get into the minutia and get involved with the daily operations, where it's really the management or the manager's role to do that. So I think, being cognizant of that is a good thing. Another is just to vent. Try to vent safely, try not to vent to other residents, but try to vent. Find a trusted friend that you can vent to, or a regional director, or a vice president. Vent. You do, often need space just to unload without any judgment. Another thing that I always mention to boards is to focus on the wins. Remind yourself, that, you've been doing a lot of things to improve the association. And if you remember that and you share those wins, I think it's really, important. I recommend to boards to share the wins, show the membership what you're working on and what you're doing and what has been happening either in, monthly board meetings or on a quarterly basis. And at the end of the year, do a, year in review presentation for your membership so they can see the laundry list of things that you've been working on. I think that's another way to, hopefully avoid feeling stretched too thin. Reconnecting with why you joined the board in the first place. Was it to improve your community? Was it to make sure that the finances of the association were handled correctly? Was it to bring transparency to your community? Just trying to reconnect and remind yourself why you joined the board in the first place. Self-care is another way to avoid feeling stretched too thin. That is really important, and don't need to elaborate on it, but proper sleep and eating healthy. I know it's easier said than done, but self-care is really important. And I think last but not least is to think about an exit strategy. If the being on the board is not sustainable any longer and it's just not healthy for you as a board member, it's okay, to plan an exit. I think if that is something that you are looking, to consider, I would recommend trying to do it responsibly and, maybe prepare a successor to take your place or, to present to the board, as somebody that they might want to appoint to the board, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And thank you, Kathleen. I will chime in before I hand it over to Sharif. I love celebrating the wins. All of us need to celebrate those wins. And I think that's something, before and after pictures for your weekly mass communication, show the residents what you're doing is super important. And we talked a little bit about committees and engagement. Delegate, get others involved, delegate that stuff out and have them report back to you. You are not, a board member is a volunteer. They are, they're acting on behalf of the association. Management is there to manage at the direction of the board. So give that up to management to take care of. If it's a portfolio properties and portfolio contracts are a little bit different because we're sharing the work, right? So it's not a full 40-hour concierge service contract, but maybe you revisit that. If it's too much on board members, revisit that. Let's adjust the management hours and put more on management if it gets to be too much. Sharif, your thoughts on even misalignment of the board, I think causes a lot of issues there. So you want to share a little bit on that too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we touched on a lot of the stuff, but if there's something you're to walk away from, I think it boils down to communication, transparency, and collaboration, right? And in addition to that, if you have the relationship piece, that kind of makes the puzzle all fit together. So it's okay to say time out if you're seeing tensions are building and, go for a break, sidebar with certain board members, bring everybody back together on what the original goal is, because a lot of times people or meetings get derailed because somebody is, like we mentioned, has several factors that illustrate a burnout, or a resident might have whispered in their ear before they came into a board meeting, their own heartburn regarding a certain issue. So sticking to the goals and objectives needs to be primary. Making sure that transparency through the communication and having the common goal is there. And it's okay to take time out, regroup, re-energize everybody, and then last but not least is build that relationship. So some of the best boards I have within various communities I have are they're pretty close, right? They've been neighbors for years. They have a vested interest in their asset. They have a common goal. They want to be part of the solution and not, eliminate any negativity that might be transpiring from previous boards or within the residents, and to be proactive on addressing the issues and concerns. And it's okay if there are certain issues that your fiduciary responsibility you're not able to get to because it's might be one person's priority, but the other person or the rest of the board might not see that needs to be a priority. It's okay to share that with the residents as well as have sure the board is aligned on the communication. Just
So you
because one
bring,
person thinks the
yeah.
building's burning down because the paint is bubbling within their unit, that is not the case. So again, just having that relationship, discussing everything, and then being transparent and communicating to all the residents as well. So they have full visibility to what's transpiring.
It is
So a lot
funny
of your
too.
communities.
Oh, sorry about misalignment. In the past few years, we've had to sit down with some boards where the board, like a board member, board president or whoever has reached out to us and has said, look, our board is going off the rails. There's, tension. It's just, it's not working out. Can you help us? And we've had to sit down and do like a board realignment. Everybody come to the table. Let's talk about, the reason why everybody joined the board. What is the common good of the association? So I think sometimes having just that sit down with the entire board. Now, sometimes, board members don't want to join in, and that's okay. But we've seen great success when we have sat down with the board, to just kind of just let's all focus back on why we joined the board, and for the greater good of the community.
Yeah, normally they'll weed themselves out if if board members are on there for the wrong reasons. So they'll end up weeding themselves out.
Yeah.
But something that really, really worked at my properties when I was an RD is to have a tasking list. These are our projects. This is our wish list. And the entire board reviews it regularly. They put their top five items first. And then as we knock one out, we'll work on the top 3 at a time. As we knock one out, we go to the next one. And that's something that's very easy to share with the membership, show them where we're at. And it also will limit, it's a visual, right? So if the board sees that and they're taking on 7, 8, 9, 10 projects at a time, Paris wasn't built overnight. It steps, right? So, hey, let's bite off these 3 big things. When we're done with these, we'll add, when we're done with one, we'll add the next one. And you'll be surprised how much more alignment there is within the board, therefore within the community, and how much more gets done so much quicker because the board knows what their priorities are, and so does management. And it's a lot easier to execute when everybody's on the same page and working toward the common goal.
That's a great point. I think some of my communities also, the boards have created their own board rules, regulations, or ethical guidelines, which keeps them in check. So every once in a while, they'll revisit it once or twice a year to make sure that everybody's behavior is in compliance and accommodating what they agreed on when they put the rules and regulations for themselves as a board. And if there is somebody stepping outside of those boundaries, then they're able to reference that document and say, this is what we agreed to, guys. Let's make sure we're aligned with this. We don't want to create a hostile or toxic environment. We definitely don't want the residents, feeling we're misaligned because that will cause concern on not just one member, but it could be several members or stereotype the entire board if they're actually moving forward in the right direction.
Kind of like a board code of conduct, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's worked a lot in the past. So we have some time for some questions. So why don't we dive into some of those? Let's take this one. How do you recommend that board members talk amongst each other before formal open meetings? So the way that we normally do it, in South Florida, when I was in RD, I would have my manager send out the completed board packet at least 72 hours before the meeting. And they would email back asking questions, and they will discuss. There's no motions made during the meetings. There's no business decisions, nothing like that. So they will email back and forth asking questions. Sometimes a couple of the board members, enough not to constitute quorum. So there's never quorum on a phone call. We have to make sure that if we are talking, discussing business, we don't have quorum. Email without decisions is okay. And they talk through it. And maybe that one of those people hangs up and then goes and calls a different board member. And but they don't make decisions until they get to the board meeting when a motion is made.
Yeah, sometimes I've had managers hold back-to-back meetings with board members, so there is no
That's a good one,
quorum.
too.
So they sit down, they go over this, so that everybody's aligned when it comes to the board meeting, and the board is up to date on what's going to be on that agenda. And that's pretty successful as well, having them one 30-minute meeting, another 30-minute meeting, and then they're done. And then the board feels more comfortable walking into the board meeting.
Yeah, as long as there isn't a quorum, I mean, they're your neighbors. It's okay if you're having a sidebar conversation with a fellow board member about a certain topic or issue, or understanding their views, or inquiring about what their friends or other residents are also sharing. I think if you have a 360-degree view of what the concerns or issues are, it makes you a better board member. The more collaborative you are, I think it ensures not only transparency but alignment, right? So the relationship piece I think, is an important part of not only for your fellow residents, but as board members as well.
Completely agree. Good answers. So let's take best practices to encourage owners to join board meetings, and best practices regarding term limits. Does anyone want to jump in on that?
What was the first one? Best practice to join?
To get board, to encourage owners to join board. I'm sorry, to join boards. Best practice to get owners to join the board. So make them sweet talk them into jumping on as board members.
Well, I think the first thing is just if a board can show that they're all aligned, that there's not a lot of drama and a lot of disrespect. The last thing, a potential, owner wants to do, as far as a potential board member, is walk into a hornet's nest. It's hard to get engagement. So if a board is very professional, and that there's respect, going back to that code of conduct, that it is a business, right? And the board, it's like being, the board of a big company, organization, with multi-million-dollar budget. So I think that would be one way. And also too, like I said earlier, just having very effective and respectful board meetings. It does show, that, hey, I might be willing to run for the board.
But yeah, go ahead, Sherry.
I think in addition to that, your property management team should have a pulse on all the residents. So they would also be able to provide insight which residents are inquiring more than other residents regarding board activity or what's happening within your property. So those will be identified as people that are engaged, care, and want to be involved. Also by creating subcommittees, whether it's a lifestyle committee or a finance committee, those people that are identified on those committees also might be great candidates for future board openings, because they're obviously showing the level of commitment on a volunteer basis to make a difference within the community, and to stay dialed in on what's transpiring as well.
I completely agree. And I want to go back to Kathleen's comment about making sure, we're representing kind of when there's alignment in the board, when board meetings are running effectively, more owners are willing to join the board. However, sometimes we need that change because the boards are running that way. we want to make sure that we pick someone or solicit an owner to get on the board that's going to help with the dynamics a little bit. So I think judging personalities, because Kathleen, we all know it. We have those kind of boards, and we have really amazing success stories and switching them around, and not even switching the board members, but just figuring out what is it that's causing all this and how do we fix it, right? They tell you we're in property management, we're psychiatrists, we're therapists, we're everything. We are lucky enough to have different, to hear from every single board member. I think for management to sit down and really take the time to understand those board members, really dig into why are they being defensive? Why are they pushing back? Why are they causing ruckus in the community? And a lot of times it's just something little that they're not seeing eye to eye on. Right. And once we figure that out, we have alignment within the boards. And don't forget, there's more than one board member on a board for a reason, because you want to get those different perspectives from everybody. We don't want cookie cutter everybody on there. So I think even if we have those issues, let's just try to figure out what the issue is. And if we can't do that, find someone that understands both sides. Maybe a resident that, has no issue with the board members that are causing a ruckus, and also sees eye to eye as well for the quieter ones, right? So maybe they can be the bridge that's going to help us figure out that board and get them to align. And
yeah, that's a great point. I think something also to consider, because a lot of times certain communities, like, well, the boards are running everything and they're going to pick their best friend to be on the board so they could have an influence and get their personal agendas across. If you're hearing that, or good practice is to create a nominating committee, and that committee keeps the board out of it and filters through all the candidates that are coming through that are applying for the board, understanding their professional background, what contributions can they make the board. Then the nomination committee filters down maybe the top 2 or 3 candidates, and then goes to the board and says, here's our recommendation as a nomination committee, or would be a good fit and a compliment to the board. So that takes all that noise out, or the pressure on the board of why did you select Jimmy because you don't like John or whatever it is. So put it in the nomination committee's hand, do your due diligence, and I think you'll be set for success.
I agree. Great discussion there. Okay, we'll take one last one. Are associations required to have a grievance committee? I will take it if you guys would like.
Depends.
You can't. You don't have to. If you're one of those communities that are lucky enough to tell a resident, hey, you forgot to pressure clean your roof, can you please pressure clean your roof? And they do it, and you don't have to do anything else. You just got to remind them. That's great. But you may have situations where residents, and this happens far few in between, they're just not doing anything, right? They're neglecting their community. You can send them, and remember, statute is different by state, but in Florida, you can send them a violation. You can send them the next one, threaten them with a fine. You cannot fine them unless a grievance committee meets and votes on that fine, confirms the fine. So the board has to approve it, and then the committee has to confirm it. That is in Florida. I don't know how other states operate. Just check your statutes. But it's like crying wolf. If you don't have a grievance committee, you're crying wolf. And I know how hard it is to get anybody on the grievance committee. For those of you that don't know, that's like the violations committee, right? And I think a lot of it is misunderstanding, especially in Florida. A grievance committee or violations committee does not go out and give the violations, does not deal with the resident at all. Management does that. The grievance committee just says, yep, the proper letters were sent out, proper notice was given out, and yes, a violation does exist, and yes, it's still there. That's all of it.
I think also identifying, right, whether you have an architectural committee or governing body that's overseeing that, is outlining what is causing a violation or grievance. So if that's spelled out from the start, it's always something you can reference to, that all residents understand, and understand the process that it goes through, right? Could be a warning, could be a second warning before it turns into a violation. Each board or bylaws are different, so understand that, but have those defined expectations clear and communicated to all residents. And a lot of the times it needs to happen during orientation. So when you have new residents moving within your community, that is the time to outline this area as well, and make sure your management company's following that. So there isn't, nobody ever told me when I moved into this community or into this building, and now you're starting to fine me or give me violations. So you can eliminate all that noise if you set the expectations and the standards and then share it with new owners, residents during orientation, or even during board meetings, just to refresh everybody's mind, or maybe once a year revisit that topic to ensure everybody refresh their memories, and those that don't know are now aware of it. So it minimizes any grievances or discrepancies.
And my favorite, the mass communications. It's after the holidays, the lights need to come down, shoot a mass email. Hey, don't forget your holiday lights need to come out by this. Or after rainy season, take a look at your roofs, time to pressure clean your roofs or driveways. Remember, the goal is not to find to the residents. It is to make sure your community is as beautiful as possible. So getting ahead of it, reminding them, because we always, all of us will forget. Life is busy. So just little reminders seems to help a ton. So that was our last question due to time. To wrap up, what's the single best piece of advice for board members to be successful in their roles? Kathleen, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think what's really important for board members to understand is that their role means that they really need to familiarize themselves with the governing documents of the association and how their community is to be governed. I would say that for sure, have a really good understanding of the laws that govern the association. Very, very important. Being transparent with the residents, communicating and giving regular updates. And then kind of going back to what I was, elaborating on a moment ago, is just being aware of potential burnout.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think for me, it's three things: transparency, communication, and collaboration. As long as you're doing those three things, in addition to what Kathleen and May have disclosed earlier in the call, you're doing, we're all human, but you're doing the best you can. You're educated, and you're trying your best by collaborating, being transparent, communicating, not only to your fellow board members, but to the residents as well. So nobody's in the dark or making false accusations.
I love those. Those are awesome. Mine would probably be, we all want to hit the ground running, but don't take an opportunity. Don't make decisions. You are allowed, just like a new employee, you're allowed to let it all sink in, take all that knowledge in, figure things out, and then start making those decisions. And Paris wasn't built overnight, right? You take your time, really focus on what your priorities are, and take it step by step. It's all of your community together doing this. They don't expect you to move mountains overnight. So Kathleen, Sharif, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. And you're welcome. Thank you. And to our attendees, we hope you found this information helpful, and we'll find ways to take it and put it to work in your community. I wish everybody a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.